Next curve.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Next Curve's reThink webcast series on security and trust, where we talk about the hot topics in the world of technology, privacy, and trust that matter. And, today we're going to be talking about a series of Data Diva 911 situations / incidents. It's getting outrageous out there, don't you think? It's crazy, right?
It's absolutely outrageous. So true.
Yeah, and so namely, we're going to be talking about this CrowdStrike quote unquote outage, AT&T and Snowflake. So you guys might have forgotten actually that there was a massive data breach, and then we'll cap things off with a delightful conversation about our favorite topic, which is privacy and Google's reneging on eliminating cookies on Chrome, as they had sort of suggested that they would do. And I have none other than Debbie Reynolds, the Data Diva of Debbie Reynolds Consulting LLC. How are you doing, my lady?
I'm well. Thank you for inviting me again. You always bring up all the hot topics, so it's great.
Oh, yeah. Well, every Data Diva 911 situation is a hot topic, right? So, you and I kind of pinged each other, we can't help it. We have to talk about this, right? It's all piling up. It's getting pretty crazy. And, I say, hey, why don't we start with CrowdStrike and the quote unquote outage? Because, I'm telling you, when you look at the news cycle and how people have talked about this incident, people lost it. Initially, everyone thought it was a cybersecurity, some sort of cyber attack. And then they thought it was cloud related. And then there was like mass confusion, right? People writing about all kinds of stuff. But then everyone kind of settled on this term outage. And I don't know. I think it's a mischaracterization of what really happened that kind of led to everyone thinking that was some sort of network outage or a cloud outage. But what was your take early on, and where do you think we're going with this thing? This incident that actually had very material impact, right? With Malaysia now asking CrowdStrike and Microsoft to pay for the losses.
Yeah. Wow. Well, first of all, when I heard it, I didn't believe the explanation that was given about how it happened, how it came to be. And I still don't believe that. Right. So I'm in a way, I'm kind of just trying to wait to hear, because as all these lawsuits get filed, as all these regulators get involved, I think more information will come out, but it'll probably be weeks and months until we get more information. But the thing that concerns me, and I'm glad that you called me, because I think it's not something that you can really write in a post, can't really explain it. Mm-hmm. Is that regardless of how it happened, the sheer scope of it is a problem, right? And it's not a one company problem or a two company problem. This is something I think. This is the reason why we have regulation, So some of the ways that these tools are helping to power things that happen in the world, like flying aviation, to me, that's almost like a utility. So it's like, we need to think differently about how these types of things are protected. So like from a cyber perspective, I feel like when we talk about cybersecurity, we talk about it like, let's prevent breaches, let's prevent. But what if you can't stop a breach, or what if you can't stop an outage or incident? How do you contain it, right? So I think the discussion needs to be more about resilience. You shouldn't have the tools of one or a few companies take down, the world. that is a problem, I think. So we need to figure out what we need to do to be more resilient. And some
Yeah.
of that to me is not even technological, maybe
Yeah.
not do a patch to everything at once, or, do things in segments. Don't do certain things. I don't know. I know, especially as I do some collaboration with people
Mm.
who work in, like, aerospace and stuff like that. They tend to, they have backup legacy systems, stuff they can
Yeah.
fall back on. It's like not the most current, right? So
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think we need to be talking about more about resilience so that we're not, no one should have to say, okay, this one company did this thing and let's like get pitchforks out and run after that company.
Yeah.
Part of it is like, how do we build a better, more resilient way that we use technology across the board?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, the incident certainly raises the question of what could have been done to make the affected companies more resilient so that this incident didn't have the impact that it did. But, I think number one, I think you're making a very wise comment. We don't necessarily know exactly what happened. We do have things that CrowdStrike is publishing, right? They're putting out disclosures, and I assume that there's some regulatory obligation to oversight, and that will force them to be forthright in how they're informing their customers. If not, I think they're going to just get themselves in more trouble. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But, I think the other thing that we have to definitely from the standpoint of a business concern, if you're a customer of any of these technology companies, right, you need to have a business continuity strategy. And I know it's really easy to say that, right? It's super easy to say that. But it's interesting, just like cybersecurity, business continuity, having a strategy, it could be just as complex and difficult as cybersecurity because there's so many vectors, right, where your digital systems can be compromised. And cybersecurity attack is only one form. This is, in my view, is something entirely different. This is like literally a service provider bricking all your endpoints or many of your endpoints because of a software bug that they introduced into into client systems, right? And one of the things that they mentioned is that that this was what they call. Let me see. I read this new disclaimer that they put out, or this new press release, and it's called Remediation and Guidance Hub. It's on their Remediation and Guidance Hub. It's Falcon content update for Windows hosts, and it was published today. And it basically cites that this was an issue with a rapid response content that was issued. So this wasn't like a software and agent update, which is that sort of software that resides on a client device. This is like a config file, kind of. It's like a security profile file. And that's what corrupted everything. And they're citing that there was a thing called a content validator, which sounds like some sort of automation tool, maybe AI, that checks, is supposed to do the QA on the code before it's released, right? And I think this is where we have maybe a problem where I'm going to be very interested in finding out whether or not there was an over-reliance on automation using AI that caused this. Because the more you look at some of the details, it's what it kind of looks like, and it might be a come to Jesus moment that we need to be very careful about how we trust any kind of automation or AI tools that we incorporate into let's say QA or your release management cycle. I think it's really important that that we take a second look at that, because as much as people thought that this was a cybersecurity incident, it's what it looks increasingly like is a release management QA problem related to some form of automation that they implemented where there wasn't a man in the middle, ironically, right? Because usually in cybersecurity, you don't want a man in the middle, right? But when in QA, ideally, you want a man in the middle that makes sure that any piece of code that gets distributed out to a client device doesn't have defects in it, right? And then there's somebody crossing the T's and dotting the I's before something goes out and causes an incident like this. Provided, going back to what you're saying, this is in fact what the root cause of that incident was.
Yeah, I know we were talking about technology, but to me, these issues are not technology problems.
Yeah.
They manifest themselves as technology problems. Like, we're talking about management, we're talking about staffing, we're talking about process.
Yeah.
Who pushes a update out on Friday? I thought we didn't do that. Or, who doesn't put things in sandbox before they push it out to production? Or, why are so many systems dependent on one thing, a single point of failure? And, and going back to what you said about business continuity and things like that, to me, those are all kind of management, judgment, human issues, right? So, they have manifest themselves in technology, but the more I hear about it, I'm thinking we need to do things differently around how we manage technology. And so part of that is not putting all of our eggs in one basket, or not, having more, just like I said, men in the middle or women in the middle.
I know. I hate man in the middle, person in the middle. Yeah. Be inclusive.
Someone who could say, this is a bad idea, or we need to, check this first, or let's test it on a couple of computers before we push it out to everything. To me, maybe I've been out of like the hands-on keyboard thing too long, but we used to do that.
Yeah.
Those are all things that we did. You have to have a rollback strategy. One of the things people were saying, I can't remember what company came out with. They said they had a file that people could put on a thumb drive that they could take from computer to computer. But they were like, well, what if your company has put a policy on your computer that you can't read like a thumb drive, right? So then what are you going to do? You put the computer in safe mode. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's bananas, absolutely. So, part of us adopting all this new technology, we think it's so cool and fast and easy, is to really think about how can, what would happen if, X airline was down, or what would happen if, to me, this is almost the type of continuity planning that goes to utilities. Like if your power went out or something, that's the type of resilience that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Retailers have a lot of this stuff. It's not to say that they don't have outages or suffer outages, but they have infrastructure that is redundant, right? And so you have failover infrastructure that you can rely on, at least to continue your business in a different modality that may not, be as quote unquote digital and as if you were, let's say, status quo or steady state. You do have a fallback position and you can continue your business. But man, but when the blue screen of death shows up, there's not a lot you can do, other than start using pencil and paper. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, I had a couple of situations where I gone to a drugstore, and they were like, the computers are down, so they had to close up everything. They're like, we can't sell you anything, we can't give you anything, and that just did not used to be the case, right? So before, technology was used as a helper, as opposed to everything is computerized and we can't do anything if the computers aren't working. We need to really think through that strategy, because there were people who needed medication that could not get it just because the computer went down, so I think we need to really think differently
Yeah.
about what resilience means and what business continuity means, especially in situations where people can be harmed as a result.
Yeah, and I one of the things I try to be kind of cautious about, and sort of bring this the business continuity thing up too much, is because I do want most of the attention to be focused on CrowdStrike. Right now there's a lot of deflecting, trying to make it look like the customers or the clients of CrowdStrike are at fault, blame it on the CIO, et cetera, et cetera. And then, and then you have Microsoft that went, and I don't know, it looks like they pointed the finger at regulators. I don't understand that. That's kind of an odd move on their part, given, they're at the moment, it doesn't seem like it's their, they were the root cause per se, right? The blue screen of death is an unfortunate, sort of unwanted poster child for Windows, but they're kind of a victim of that, in my view. And so, I try to keep it straight, and I don't think, Microsoft should get heat that they don't deserve. But then, like you said, it's still early. As the regulators start to take a look at this, you see the lawyers and the lawsuits come in, then you're going to see the details get vetted, a lot of our assumptions clarified, and we'll start to see what really happened and who's quote unquote at fault, right? Because obviously the insurance companies will get involved as well. But yeah, what do you think about that? Microsoft's position. Do you think that they were sort of maybe innocent bystander that got hit by the truck, or or do you think that they had a hand in this?
That's a good question. I don't think, I do not think whatever happened, I don't think obviously it's malicious in nature or anything,
Yeah.
but I think people are, people who are blaming Microsoft's like, oh, your software or your systems weren't constructed like this, then this wouldn't have happened. So I think that there's going to be a lot of finger pointing going around, but at the end of the day, I think people just want stuff to work. They want to be able to get on flights and not have problems. And so, I think maybe how it happened, regulators be very concerned about that because they want to make sure it doesn't happen again, or think about what can be done differently than what we do now that can make this, reduce the scale and scope of the problem. And I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
So if it had happened, let's say if it only happened in one sector or one area, or just like I said, I have to bring it back to almost like this power analogy. So you have a storm and the power goes out in a particular area of town, right? So everyone else has power, but you don't. But this is almost like, okay, everybody who drives cars can't drive cars right now. So it wasn't as that bad, but the scale and scope of it is what made it hugely, a huge problem, and the length of it. And so I think that's why regulators are going to be really concerned. And so I think there's probably going to be a lot more calls for regulation around how these companies operate, especially if they're doing all this kind of cross-sector work in how the digital systems and software work together.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier process and practices. I think, I mean, I surmise, or at least my view is, this might be a mindset issue, because now if you look at software development, it's really leaned toward this whole agile CI/CD, get stuff out as quick as you can type of mentality. I mean, it's kind of like the Silicon Valley way of thinking. And I'm hoping, that the incident will shift the mindset of developers, because it's really, really sad that this happened to CrowdStrike, because we don't need this to happen to the defenders, right? Because the cybersecurity problem is getting bigger and bigger. When I was at RSA C 2024, there's a huge concern about the asymmetrical enablement of the bad actors versus what the defenders can do or the cybersecurity practitioner can do. And these companies, it's just really sad when they stumble like this. And maybe stumble, it's like collapse is really what it is, because this is more than a stumble, right? And I think hopefully there's that mindset shift, because I really wonder what the regulation would look like. Do you know what I'm saying? Especially if this is process related. Maybe, who knows? Maybe there is like a Sarbanes-Oxley kind of moment here where regulators go in, and if you're going to play in the cybersecurity game, you have to have certain standards for, let's say, rapid response content deployment, or profile updates, or whatever that you're doing on any device, right? So it's like going back to basic principles of quality software and distribution practices. Kind of like what they did when Enron collapsed, and nobody wanted to take responsibility. There's now regulation to make sure that executives are accountable for their accounting, right? Maybe, but that's also sad, because this is not an easy game. This is not an easy game for these companies, and they take on so much risk to be in the game, right?
Yeah. I don't think you can. To me, I think the mindset has to shift from preventing situations. Not that you shouldn't try to prevent things, but what happens is that the scope and scale of what happens in the aftermath of something, that needs to be a focus, because we need to, contain it more, limit it more, make it, less harmful, in terms of the scope and scale and time and all that type of stuff. So to me, there's some steps missing, in the process. Maybe it makes it more expensive, maybe it takes longer to push those updates out, but at least we wouldn't have these massive outages that compound and just make things worse, right? So like I saw like people. Thank God I wasn't in Madrid back then, but I was there like a couple weeks ago. But like I saw the Madrid airport, and like all the flights were canceled. People couldn't get to their bank. People couldn't get to customer service. I tried to call like a utility company recently, and they were like, "Oh well, we can't. None of the agents can talk to you because all their computers are down." Right. So it's like that should not happen. Like, what I'm saying? Maybe it's okay, some flights are canceled, or some banks are working, or some, but to have people have a multitude of failures, tied to one company or one process or one procedure. I just we need to relook at all that.
Yeah. And I have a funny feeling a lot of CIOs are going to change their standards for what they expect from their cybersecurity providers, whether it's managed service or they're selling software or what have you. They'll probably update the criteria, right? And then maybe that being part of a quality check on the server, because a lot of companies outsource a lot of their stuff, especially in IT. It's going to be likely a new practice or a new set of requirements that CIOs are going to impose on these vendors. So
I think so.
Yeah. So hey, I wanted to talk about AT&T and the Snowflake breach, because I wanted to get your take on it. It's funny because no one talks about it anymore. It's almost like, AT&T got saved by the CrowdStrike incident, because this thing was major, and then now everyone talks about is the CrowdStrike incident. But this one was pretty serious too, right? Where there were millions of Americans who had their data compromised in this breach. So, what was your take on the whole situation?
Yeah. Obviously concerning. I guess the breach, it was a certain time period,
Mm,
like a couple of months, I would say, or a
yeah,
month or so.
yeah,
Still, that's still a lot of data. And I think
yeah,
AT&T said that it wasn't any like, credit card numbers or anything like that. But, to me, my concern is that it was probably enough information to make a credible phishing email to someone, right?
right, right.
Like they know more details about you depending on who has that data and what they're doing with it. And then I think they pay ransom or something?
Yeah,
There's some
they paid
ransom.
ransom of, I think it was like 300. I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
the exact number, but it was like around
it's ransom.
300K. So it's like chump
Yeah,
change kind of if you really think
yeah.
about it. Not
I
that
don't know.
I don't know, ransomware at a discount. I don't know, but
Yeah, I
you
don't know.
know,
I don't know. I
yeah,
think, well, that one is going to play out for years in the courts, I think.
yeah,
So to me, it'll be like CrowdStrike,
yeah,
where we'll be getting more details about it. But I think one of the things that concern me about it is that they thought, companies that have those breaches, they have to do this 8K reporting,
mm,
saying if the breach was material or not. And I think they said they didn't think it was material, quote unquote.
mm,
So in their view, material was they didn't think it would have a big impact or a big negative impact on like shareholders and stuff like that. But I think maybe we need to rethink what material means, because if you're
yeah.
the person who's breached and your data is out there, that's material to me.
Yeah,
you know,
that is a
so
really good point, and it is kind of awkward. I mean, if not just plain messed up. That is, that is the priority. But yeah, I understand that those are like financial disclosures, and you're catering to investors in those disclosures. But I think this has all had a cumulative effect because T-Mobile had a breach just a few months before, and T-Mobile's had several, right? And this just accumulates and continues to feed the dark web, if you will, and that's like fuel for. I mean, we talk about how data is the fuel for AI. Well, that's the fuel for cybercrime, right? The more public data that's out there that bad actors can access, and then use AI to support and scale out their attacks. That's becoming the increasingly that's becoming like the increasingly outstanding concern. Like they don't have to get it perfect every single time. You know what I'm saying? They can repeat the attacks as long as they can find it in, and then put a social engineering wrapper around it to kind of ease that pill, allow it to get through. That's all they need. And as long as they have these tools to augment their attacks, and then once they're in, scale things out, that you know that's what these data leaks over the years have enabled. And it's something that we don't hear talked about enough, and why these data breaches are not okay in any degree, right? Because how can we trust anything? How can we trust AT&T? How can we trust T-Mobile? How can we trust banks now, who are now so paranoid about people making, let's say, Zelle payments, or whatever form of digital payment, because there's bad actors that are basically trying to use phishing attacks to steal money, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
unfortunately, the companies get the profit and the consumers get the pain, right? So we're not just one company. We're dealing with all these different companies. All these different breaches have touched all of us in different ways, right? Whether it's us
yeah, yeah,
personally or people that we know, or it's probably had an negative impact in some way on other people. And so, to me, that part is the part that is annoying, And
Mhm.
I think it's wrong that it's like the individual has to kind of fend for themselves. It's problematic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's like a whole karma thing, right? It's like as these data breaches continue to happen, and your dark web profile continues to get more accurate and higher fidelity, then these bad actors have very specific, precision weapons that they can use, and they're going to attack the same companies, right, that are leaking data.
Hmm.
And so and that's why privacy is so important. And so let's talk about Google and
Yeah.
their backing out of this, this initial intent, expressed intent to
Yeah.
get rid of cookies
Yeah.
in
Well,
Chrome.
this is some really interesting legal maneuvering on their
Mhm.
part, and I want to see how that kind of pans out. Because first there was Flock. Remember Flock? So Flock came out, and then that didn't go, and then we got the privacy sandbox. And then so they're saying, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the sandbox, but we're not going to eliminate cookies. So I just want to see what they're trying to do.
Mhm.
Someone says that what they're trying to do is go more towards a situation where the person is more of consent based, but they want to do it where it's kind of where you right now when you opt out, when you're on Google, you opt out of things. You're only opting out of maybe the thing that you're doing right then, or maybe a particular, products in their whole kind of universal
Yeah.
stuff, but not everything. So I think they're trying to go more towards maybe a universal, not quite universal, but more universal than we have now. Opt out for people.
Yeah.
I think my concern there is Google has so many different properties, and so
Mhm.
people, I think it is incumbent upon them if they're not going to do the third party cookie depreciation, like they said they're going to do, making sure people understand what exactly it is,
Yeah.
how to opt out and how to do it easily and what they're opting out of. Because I think it's just totally complex. So one of the things in the sandbox was topics. So topics was instead of us using a cookie, a third party cookie on your computer, we'll just take your browsing history for a certain amount of time and we'll try to send it to these companies, it's some type of way to give them an idea how to target you based on quote unquote topics. And to me, topics are like way worse than a cookie. So I'm concerned that we're going to have now what they say is we're going to have the sandbox that has topics and cookies. That doesn't sound very good, but we'll see. We'll see. They're supposed to
Yeah.
come up with, regulators, especially I think they're the first ones to start it.
Yeah.
They're not happy with this
Yeah.
because they've been promised for like 4 years that the cookie
Yeah.
is going to go away, the third
Yeah.
party cookie. They're a different company, like Apple, they did their app transparency thing. And so
Yeah.
I think that Google's trying to go in that route, but I think it's harder for them because, part
Yeah.
of their bread and butter as a company is selling data. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of their advertising product, it would definitely, um, I don't know if it would scale back what they might functionally be able to do, right, for their customer. But I always think that there could be a different vector for innovation that actually respects, the consumer or the user's privacy. I think one of the challenges is going to be, as you look at a lot of these companies that are now becoming even more embattled by the privacy concerns, is the cost of actually the re-engineering or reinventing their business models, right, or their operating models, right. And so that might be specific, even down to a revenue model, and figuring out, okay, what actually makes sense, and then how do you systematically build that new operating model out that caters to the protection of user privacy. And the thing that I thought, what I heard on the earnings call last night, I did listen in, or yesterday was this was because the advertisers' reactions were very, very strong against this. And so they kind of caved into their real customers. And so this is a good reminder to everyone, unless you're paying a subscription, if you're just consuming Google stuff for free, you are not the customer. Customer is the advertiser. And I don't know why people still don't get this. There's a lot of people who don't understand the freemium model. And, and so for me, yeah, I'm with you. I was disappointed. And, it'll be interesting to see how they at least provide some degree of remedy. I did read that it's going to be you have to opt out. So default opt in to cookies. So you have to know about it. You have to go in and you have to opt out, which is, as you and I talk about, that is not privacy first. That's privacy last, right? That's not how Apple does it. Apple says it's by default, you're opted out and you have to opt in. Folks at Google, if we got it wrong, reach out to us and we'll definitely correct. But that is what I've read in some official statements and accounting of the situation. So
yeah, that's what I heard. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, they haven't said what this new iteration will be, right? So maybe be a sandbox plus something else. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. No, I think everyone should go back to banner ads if everyone remembers that, and rotation ads and keyword search based ads. I mean, anyways, that's just me. I was there before all this personalization stuff happened, so I remember what it was like back then.
Yeah.
And they were still sort of making money. You can still make money that way. It's just maybe, and do it without infringing upon, everyone's privacy. But you could still deliver a freemium service, right?
Yeah, sure.
So
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. But anyway, anything else to add on that? The Google's,
no.
yeah.
No, we'll watch it. We'll watch it.
We'll watch it.
Talk about this some more.
Yeah, actually, all of these things we have to watch. But, one of the things that I would just encourage the listeners to do is have a better, just arrive at a more accurate frame of mind and perspective on what's happening here. I mean, this is, the whole CrowdStrike thing, very, 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 very likely not any form of, cybersecurity attack, and it's really endpoint bricking, a lot of what that was. And then, this whole thing with Snowflake at AT&T, there's been a lot of questions about who's responsible, right? I think you're as a organization, I think pretty much everyone knows you're ultimately responsible for the service providers you use, and you're responsible for vetting how they handle your customers' data, right? And so, these are important basic principles that we should, but I don't think they're necessarily common knowledge, right? They're not necessarily common knowledge, but our goal is to make it common knowledge so that we all react and respond to these incidents in a, contextually accurate way.
There is a story I want to talk about. I think I posted about it on LinkedIn about Oracle.
Right.
So Oracle, so it's a big deal. You probably know more about what's been happening than I do, but
everything.
So Oracle. Well, I'll start with the story. So Oracle, they settled a case recently, and it was a privacy case, and it had to do with their data brokering business they had. And so the case settled for $115 million. In part of the settlement, they had to stop some of their data collection and data sharing with third parties that they were doing in their data brokerage business. But then on, that's just that case. But what I've been hearing in the news is that Oracle, for a couple of years, they had this data brokering business and it was doing well. Then as they started trying to change around complying with all these regulations and trying not to get in trouble, uh, the profit fell from that business. And I think that they were or are actively getting out of that business now. And
Mhm.
so maybe that settlement is kind of like, the icing on the cake or
Yeah.
the last nail in the coffin, so to speak,
Yeah.
of that business model. But to me, I think that case and their journey on that tells me that they're thinking about, as I think people should think, privacy risk, in my view, is business risk, right? So to me,
Yeah.
that's the example that I took from what's happening with Oracle
Yeah.
and their privacy case.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like what we were saying earlier, what I mentioned earlier. I mean, there's like a whole karma aspect of this, right? That data that gets leaked out, or even with third parties. I mean, one of the last, I think one of the previous episodes we talked about, if you respect privacy and you protect it, you're respecting your customers, your partners, and actually your own business, your employees, right? And if you don't do that, you're just adding to the fuel of cybercrime. You're enabling or providing those data points for the bad actors to use that against you and your customers. I mean, I think maybe there needs to be a diagram that becomes famous that articulates and illustrates that dynamic, because that is what's happening, right? And that's why with tools like AI, we do have to become concerned, because those tools are being used to augment attacks, and they are growing. So if you go to the security conferences and talk to the security professionals and vendors and research firms, they all will tell you the frequency of attacks is growing and the sophistication of attacks are growing beyond or evolving beyond what cybersecurity professionals can head off, right? They can be reactive to things, but there's even a lag for that. So, it's a lot to think about, especially as we go from the age of the internet to now the age of AI, which a lot of people are really saying the generative AI era. But anyway,
I think protecting people's data is good for business. That's what I
yeah,
think.
yeah, we have to
So
keep
it's
pounding
not
that.
just, yeah, it's not just a feel good, rah rah thing. It has a bottom line impact. We're seeing,
Yeah,
like we talked about with the Microsoft recall.
yeah,
A lot of that backlash is like, hey, we like your product, but we don't like what you're doing with our data. So I think companies need to focus on, even you can have the best product in the world, but if you are disrespecting people's data, that will have an impact on your bottom line.
yeah, and that includes putting it at risk, right? And so, yeah, that's a great point, and that's going to be an interesting case study to continue to monitor, and hopefully it'll be a good example of exactly what you're talking about. It's respect your customers' privacy, and that doesn't mean that you can't do business. That means there's a whole different vector of innovation that you can consider, right? Whether it's from a service or features or value perspective, and how you can maybe monetize that, right, somehow. It's just I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. They just think of privacy protection as like an innovation killer. It's like, well, it might be a catalyst for you to innovate in a different way that protects
Yeah.
everyone, and
I
respects
think
everyone.
people think of it maybe as a legal obligation, right? So when you think
Yeah,
legal,
yeah,
you don't think about making money. think, oh, it's going to cost me money because now it's a legal obligation. But, you know, I'm saying rise above that and protect people's
Yeah.
data, and they'll want to do more business with you, right? So
Yeah.
most companies sell more than one thing.
Mhm.
So you want people to want to trust you enough to buy those other things that you're trying to sell. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Data Diva, this has been really fun. I'm really glad we had a chance to get on to talk about these many Data Diva 911 incidents and situations. And it's always great to get your thoughts. And why don't you take a moment to tell our audience how they can get in touch with you about your services, you know, where they can find out more about your services and get on a better path, you know, with privacy as well as security and trust.
Absolutely. So people can contact me at my website, DebbieReynoldsConsulting.com. I'm always on LinkedIn. You can just type in Data Diva Debbie Reynolds. My name pops right up. I do a lot of speaking for companies. I do a lot of writing, also advisory for companies on data protection and emerging technology issues.
Yeah, and she's on everything. She's right on top of everything, or maybe even ahead of stuff. So she's a great resource. So I highly encourage everyone to, number one, follow her. And if you're an enterprise that's looking for, you know, support and, you know, privacy and security leadership, definitely, you know, tap into, you know, what she's doing with her research and also, you know, her consulting services. And so, you know, with that, thanks everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate your interest and attention on this topic. And, you know, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And the easiest thing to do is to subscribe to our research portal and media center at www.next-curve.com. It's a great one-stop shop place for all next curve research and content media, and you'll be notified when we publish like new articles and content like this. And you know, this will be a place where you can get your daily diet of the tech and industry insights that matter. And we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, Debbie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.